So we're gonna jump right into the agenda. Rick, you're my co-chair today. Again, thank you so much for doing this. We have a little bit of a condensed agenda today, even though it's very full. Because at 5 we have a presentation from Restore Miguntico River. So we're gonna try to stop by like 10 minutes to 5. Is it? I'm looking at Bina and Lauren.
Yes.
Is it okay? Okay. So up to you on item number. Oh, call to order. It's done. Let's do the approval of minutes and then let's do the roundtable. I'm switching the order.
Sounds good.
Anybody has any comments? Surviving? Any comments on the minutes from our last meeting?
I move that they be approved as presented.
Second. All in favor? Minutes are approved unanimously. Staff is excused today. He couldn't make it, so hopefully we'll find a way to have him back. All right. Rick, over to you to the roundtable intro.
Okay. Being as concise as possible. What do you want to learn in the next 6 months? So we're moving out of sort of goofy icebreakers and into some practical stuff that might actually help steer the work.
Can I start with a question?
Please.
We asked the group, or the group was asked a while ago, a similar question. And whatever happened to the answers? I mean, whatever happened to those questions?
We will compare those to what comes up.
Ah,
Yes, thank you.
let's put a little parenthetical or, you know, like a comma and then, that differs or in light of what you said you wanted to learn 6 months ago.
I mean, maybe another way to phrase it, and maybe I can help is there something new that has arisen recently, you know, in the course of since we last asked the question, that is like, oh, damn. So, I really need to understand better this issue. So something new that wasn't in the on the radar previously, that you feel we should be digging into. But I think we also need to revisit the gap analysis, and we're going to talk about it today because that's a really good conversation. So thank you, Deb.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, I'll start. Okay.
Go for it.
One thing is that, and I think I mentioned this before, I would really like to know what all the legal issues are about taking over dams, acquiring the Knox Mill and Knowlton Street dams and Powder Mill one, and what are any legal requirements about, or what needs to be done legally with property owners who have property on the river and on the lake, because we are going to be changing part of their property or the adjoining part of their property. I think the legal issues are something we really need to find out about, whether it's from the town council or some other expert coming in. And the second one, and sort of adjoining that, is the fish ladder options. What do we have for fish ladders all the way through? One thing when we were up at the east-west dam, and I didn't realize it, is that, okay, we're gonna have a fish ladder going into the lake. We don't own any of the property there that would have to go over. That whole island island, if you want to call it, in the middle is not owned by the town. So what needs to be done? Eminent domain or whatever. So I think these are the issues that we need to do to make a recommendation on doing this whole project.
Thank you.
To add to that, with the Knowlton and Knox Mill dams, if the property owners are not amenable to having something done to their dams,
Right.
How does that affect what happens with Montgomery Dam? How does that affect the whole grant?
Yeah.
I mean, do we have a problem if in fact some of that doesn't happen?
Right.
And we talked about this on the education committee, where are the property lines for the dam at the Montgomery Dam?
Right.
And how much of that, and if those people are not amenable to having anything done, how are we gonna change? What are we gonna do?
Yeah.
Do we then look at the sustainability of the river and talk about other parts of the river? And does then that qualify for the grant?
Okay.
Similar.
Excellent. I thought you were gonna say, and maybe you said this, but how the property changes with the change in the river for those people who live on the river. Did you include that in your question? Like, just the property, as their property lines change because of the maybe changes in the river? What are the ramifications of those changes?
Yeah.
Good question.
Well, I guess the other thing too is what is the property line along the river? Do people own into the river?
Yeah.
Or do they only own up to it? I know in the harbor, it's usually low tide line, but what is it on the river?
Yeah.
So
And,
legal, I guess.
right, and I'll have, maybe joining in with that too, is are there any tax consequences? If you're taking property away from property owners and everything, are there some tax consequences or not? I don't know.
Well, there might be, not just because you're taking property, but you're taking serious amenities.
Yeah.
Yeah, particularly in the impoundment areas.
Yeah.
And that's, I have a lot of questions about the impoundment areas. From an environmentalist point of view. But also in terms of if the fish were to get up there, what happens to them in those impoundments? We have very little data on the quality of the water in the impoundments and the effect on the micro and macro invertebrates. And then connected to that is, because this is partly about the watershed, what do we know about the all-important diversity that's essential for a resilient area?
Yeah.
We don't know, I mean, the mammals, the plants, all of that. We just don't have very much information. And without that, we don't know what distance we have to go, if any, to get to the goal.
Just a quick follow-up update on what Deb is asking about, and some of the answers will start to come sooner rather than later. So the select board did vote to fund the Country Creek Watershed Association to take over the monitoring work. So we are helping transfer all the data loggers over, and they're gonna be getting in the water Thursday. And Sophie's actually going out to help do that. So there are 9 monitoring stations. I won't go into detail again, but a lot of those are in those impoundments. So
Okay,
we'll start to have a much better sense by this fall what that looks like.
but I don't want to lose the idea of the surrounding land too.
Yeah.
And the water is important, but it's not all that's there. And then if I can just say, the thing that struck me because of the dam tour, I had no idea of what kind of manual labor was involved and how old the technology is for all of those dams. And that raises not only a question of interest, but vulnerability. I was stunned.
You weren't alone.
No. So are we gonna go on that tour
We'll get to that.
with the drawdown?
Oh, with,
We talked earlier
Yeah.
about going out when they inspect the dams during the drawdown, whether the committee could follow them.
yeah, Dave St. Laurent seemed to think that would be fine, so I'll chat with him. I think he's out this week, so I'll follow up with him.
Very kind of to keep us going on the 6 month
Thank
thing. So in the next 6 months, I'm looking forward to the hydraulic modeling, the dams, active, passive, and flood studies. As another big one for me is trying to really get my head around what our deliverable looks like to the town.
When I was actually a management plan and a flooding assessment, or we call it vulnerability assessment, some kind, but also the dam maintenance costs. It'd be really helpful to know how much does it cost to currently run this system that we have, and what are our options and what would those options cost as well.
That's essentially what I'm interested in mostly, is a cost analysis of different options so that we can really kind of dive into the comparison and what actually the town could even afford to do based on these options.
Report have that.
Yes,
Yeah.
in some
Yes.
capacity.
That's gotta be updated.
Not
That's
that it's
5 years
outdated,
old. Yeah.
not the cost, I don't think, of the maintaining the dam currently, right?
It is there. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I think it does.
I think that's both, what the installation would be, and then also the annual maintenance.
And sort of the long-term cost to the town.
Okay, great. So should that be updated is the question, I guess. There's,
That's a good question.
Elfie, do you have another idea?
Another idea. The only.
Other from what's been mentioned so far?
I'm trying to get my head around, if all the dams have to go, if some of the dams have to go, like just what, variables there are with the 4 dams we're looking at.
That's kind of what I mean in terms, I mean, I know you're mentioning that there's some of the financial and the interfluve, but I feel like there's such a wide variety of options that I would need to like
Yes.
really kind of understand a little bit better what, are we talking $1 million here versus, 20 million, like what, have them so you can kind of lay them out and really look at here's the whole spectrum. In a little more comprehensive way.
And just a follow-up thought along those lines is that, just so the committee knows, some of that information will be fairly slow to come out.
Yeah,
So
totally.
we're sort
Yeah,
of
totally.
ahead as a committee, and then the project work is really getting fired up now.
Yeah, right.
With Mike Burke, so, end of next year, we'll have maybe.
So I shouldn't expect it in this 6 month window, is that what you're trying to tell me?
Well, yeah, but end of next year, but we are supposed to give a recommendation before November of next year.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah, I think some of this information is critical for us to be able to make a recommendation.
Yeah, agreed.
And I think, you brought up an interesting word, that's the money side of things.
Mhm.
And I can't tell within our charter whether we're supposed to make a decision based on whether that's supposed to be a factor in our decision or not.
Same thing in Canada.
I'm not sure whether money is supposed to be a factor in our decision or not.
That's a good question, yeah.
Well, if we feel that that's an important set of information to share with the select board and the people, then maybe we amend our charter then, or not charter, our mission. Yeah.
I think a lot of people are interested in cost and money.
Sure, I'm not saying it shouldn't, be.
Yeah.
I'm just saying if it's not, it probably should be a factor in the decision making process.
I think money and cost, and because we've looked into the issue of how much it costs to maintain dams. And I'm speaking under the control of Audra, but our accounting system doesn't have a line dam maintenance.
Mhm.
So it comes from different budget lines that are not necessarily easy to reconcile. So I want to kind of temper expectations. We cannot tell you to the cent, right?
No,
Ballpark,
no, I
we
wouldn't expect
know
that.
It's more ballpark.
Yeah, more big picture is, yeah,
Just because of the nature of municipal accounting.
yeah,
Which I will
absolutely.
spare you. But I'm happy to.
No, by all means.
But we are going to need some good estimates on fish ladder maintenance and everything too. I mean, I've heard a number for the Damascata one, and it's $90,000-$100,000 a year per year to maintain it. So, then I don't, that's what I heard. I can't say that's correct.
So do we, sorry, go ahead. The 3D model that somebody or somebodies are gonna make, is that when it runs, because I assume it'll have water or some simulation, show us the flood relevant interaction or relationship between each of those dams above the Montgomery, but the two right in Penn. Go ahead.
So I've been working with Danny Solomon at the hatchery on this. And so we're kind of stuck right in between like what our needs are and what their capacity is and their interests. So I don't know, we don't have a final version yet at all. It's just kind of in the talks stage, but I will say that, yeah, that is something I brought up to have the 7 dams on the model and be able to put water through. So you can see what happens if you remove a dam, or if you modify a dam.
Exactly.
Cool. You could die
Yeah,
in
it'd be
water.
cool
to
if you
see
could
where
make
the
every
water
single one be
goes.
manipulative.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
I mean, that would be ideal for those of us who are not engineers
Right.
or hydrologists. I mean, having a real 3D visual would help enormously.
It sounds incredibly complex to make.
Yeah, that's,
Maybe asking.
well, I mean, they're doing incredible things.
Yeah, they
so
are.
We'll
Yeah.
see, but.
So can you work with Wood and Alchemy? Because they do those 3D.
That would be cool.
Yes, I talked to them, so they're on Main Street and they do the 3D maps of all the lakes.
Yeah, like
And I
sounding
talked
maps.
to her this weekend and I said, is this something that you can do? Because she's got McGonagall and she's got part of the river.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking that if we, as a group, can maybe work with them and they can, because they just use a CAD machine to draw them.
They're like topographical.
Yeah, it's a topographical. When you walk, it's
I
right.
mean, that might be
right
a
next to
quicker
Bridget
option
Pond.
too,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I think.
And
we're
he's
working-
got half a dozen of them already.
I would be curious if they have the real engineering background to, I mean, they
To
might
make
be
it-
able to
they
do
can
the
do the
modeling
topo
part.
map.
Yeah.
But whether they can pull the pieces out to make it, but you never know.
Right, yeah, I have
You know,
no
it's just
idea.
a CAD machine.
If we could get something for Riverfest, that would be great.
Yeah.
You know, that's like the hatchery one. I don't think we'll have a finished project by mid, maybe winter at some point.
But Marty, main, was it MTI couldn't help also? Main technology, Institute of Technology?
Yeah, they have a 3D printer
They have a
actually,
3D
so
printer
that's a
too.
possibility as
The
well.
library has a
Library
3D
does as
printer,
well.
but the library does too, but yes. Okay, let's keep on moving.
I have one
Yes,
quick
please.
last thing, with the money part, it'd be nice to know what available grants might be able to pay for some of the things that we might talk about, because everyone says, oh, there are always grants available for this. So what are the grants and can we use, we
Have a grant for this.
no, I understand that, but if we change the river and take away some of the dams, can we have
Well,
additional?
yes, so I guess this probably would be helpful to everyone. So we, through NIFWIF, this grant program that we're in, we're a pipeline project. So we got the original source of funding to do the broad feasibility study. This is now for sort of more detailed design and planning. And then what they envision for us is the next phase, we're gonna be applying for something that's actually gonna be constructed. So that's sort of the track that NIFWIF has put us in. So,
Okay.
So that would be
Yeah.
part of the cost then, yeah.
right, well, I mean,
That would be for implementing the
Yeah,
plan.
right,
Implementing.
right, but at least it's something that is a possibility of.
It would be helpful though, I think, maybe what you're saying is what are the other options? Like if we don't decide to remove the Montgomery Dam, can we still get funding through that avenue, or are there other options? And what are those other options? And, you know, what does NIPWIF actually fund, et cetera? Those details, maybe create like an Excel spreadsheet showing our options.
I think it's good to show our options, but I think it's good that we work within the grant we already have. Okay, and focus on that.
I guess I'm understanding your question is like the next step. It's
Right.
actually helpful to understand. I think it'll inform our decision making if we know what money will be there.
There may be money
what's
available.
fund. Yeah.
Exactly, I mean, that's what I'm asking.
I've gotta be, I don't want us to waste time on this because a lot of people have asked me about this and there is no money unless you have a dam that creates a reservoir that creates like, you know, a drinking water reservoir. There is no money to fix old dams. I just want to be very clear because we could all go on a very long wild goose chase trying to figure that out.
Good to know. All right,
These are really good questions.
any last questions?
Did you have something else? You didn't get a turn.
I did.
Okay, all right. Oh, all right. Okay. I wasn't sure if you were just responding to somebody else's. Well, just briefly, just for the record, I'd like to find out what obstacles exist and how we overcome those to try to see about extending the Riverwalk on property that's already owned by public entities, the sanitary district and the school district. At least get it, you know, basically build where you can now, and if we can't, find out why and see if there's a workaround.
Cool. Thank you. Cool, so this is super informative. All right, we don't have.
We're gonna add Audra in, yeah.
Do you want to do that first, Audra?
Sure,
You
yeah.
want- Yeah, go ahead.
So, I got a couple of updates. So one, we signed an agreement today with Interfood for the field work that they're currently doing and we're doing this summer, as well as, you know, some other tasks associated with the project. And we're gonna split it into, you know, multiple agreements so that they have an opportunity to kind of evolve what the scope is of what they're doing in terms of the technical aspects of this project around, different recommendations that might come out of this group or different needs that arise throughout the course of the project. So that's a, really positive development, moving everything forward. Another thing, and this kind of started up with the select board a few months back, but I don't know if this was sort of communicated to all of you, so we thought it'd be good to explain it. So we have a dam operation or dam operations guidelines. I think that Dave probably explained that to you when you did your tour. And that was developed quite a few years back when the Watershed Association used to own the east and the west dam. And then they gave them to the town of Camden. And from there, an agreement was sort of developed with Lincolnville, where, Lincolnville would pay 1/3 of the cost, Camden would pay 2/3 of the cost. Came up with these dam operation guidelines and then formed a committee to sort of, help advise around, different aspects of those guidelines. And for a lot of different reasons, it hasn't worked out that way over the past 5 years or so. So the Watershed Association, because they're very well placed to, reach out to stakeholders in both Lincolnville and Camden, are going to be reaching out to the stakeholders and recommending updates to the dam operations guidelines. And then they're gonna make some recommendations on, what's a new sort of like steering group or committee that could help to administer those guidelines. So hopefully we'll get some, good recommendations from the Watershed Association within the next few months.
Good.
And do the guidelines just cover the east and west dam, or does it cover Montgomery Dam as well as Seabright?
Just east and west, that particular set of guidelines, but we have some other, some of it is from NEMA for like the Seabright Dam, because it's a high hazard dam. And then Montgomery Dam, that's always been, very informally operated. Really, it's, the only time it's opened is at the request of the business owners in their county.
Because they need to do some work on those buildings, so.
Yes, or if we know that there's going to be like a huge rain event, then the gate will be open.
Cool. Thank you, Audra.
Yeah.
Rick, can I turn it over to the written communications committee? Gina, you're doing
Yeah, if you guys want to give the update, feel free. It was about the survey. I think we should decide today if we want to go forward with the survey or not. In your packet, I did include sort of the guideline or the information that you guys created about why you're proposing the survey, what the goal of the survey is, and some of the questions. And we did reach out to the UNH Survey Center, and they are confident that they can make sure that this is a very valid survey and that it has accurate results to better understand, I think, what are our main questions. It's not going to be about opinions. It's going to be what are the knowledge gaps in the community and how can we fill them? And that's really what I think this committee would like to know. And so this is a way that we can get access to that information. Did you want to talk any more about that?
Can I just add something really quick on that, just in case everyone hasn't read this recently, because I know the survey's been updated several times.
Mhm.
It is purposely very benign, and very basic, what do you know? What don't you know? What would you like to learn? That's, obviously I'm summarizing it.
Yeah, we really took out the majority of anything that would have a lot of variability in opinion and just go with sort of the fact gathering information. And trying to keep in mind some of the concerns that were brought up by doing a survey.
I thought it was great to have the section that's demographics, at least if I understood it correctly, at the end with a little explanation of why we needed that, and then to have all those things that I wasn't too sure about at first, but we didn't have the explanation.
Yeah, and it sounded like there's also an option to like divorce the demographics from the answers so that they become anonymous.
Yes, right.
And nobody feels
I
like,
that.
yeah.
That's really good.
Although, but we just maybe think about that because it might be helpful to know which people ask, which people answer the questions.
Oh, I see.
And yeah, that could inform.
And I think the
us as
survey
well.
center will be able to understand,
Yeah.
parse that data out in a way that helps us sort of.
Yeah, and that could be anonymous, how we parse it out.
Right,
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah, and then it sounded like there were two options.
I think it's
with-
anonymous anyway, right? I mean,
Totally,
We don't have names.
yeah, no names.
Right,
No
yeah,
address.
although one of the options for putting the survey out was requiring some sort of email so that things weren't duplicated
but we cannot have like a unique key identifier when they send the survey out, because there's a way to put like a unique QR
Yeah,
code.
and the survey center will make sure of all that. They won't make everyone put in their email address. I think that they will probably do.
Because I don't necessarily need people's email address,
Right.
but something to make sure that,
Everyone's-
right?
Yeah,
I know
exactly,
you want-
exactly, yeah.
I'm not.
Just
no, no,
25?
Just 25, exactly.
I think, yeah, so I think maybe first we should talk about whether or not we want to do the survey,
Yeah.
because that's for everything else.
Yeah,
And then we can talk about how we distribute it. I don't know if we want to.
and that's something we can also turn, if we decide we want to do it, we can then say, okay, table it right now, go to UNH, have them
Right.
tell us everything, have them be the experts on how we would distribute it based on who's in this
And they can
community,
give us
how we
options.
access, exactly, and then we can then decide on what that looks like, but yeah, I think.
So-
Yeah, it was my understanding that we kind of need to decide on sending it out now in preparation of putting whatever information you would need on the postcard prior to some other step.
The River Fest, maybe? Or-
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
maybe
that
that's
was
what-
the idea is, so we can talk to UNH about this as well, is do we want to send a postcard to every household? That was a different conversation, so that everyone is aware of this committee and aware of this project.
Right.
And then also, there's a survey, and also there's a river festival, so
Right,
sort of like
exactly.
have some meaty content, not just, there's a committee, isn't that great?
Yeah, right.
This is the committee, this is why we're here, this is what we want to know, and this is what's going on, so sort of making that postcard really robust.
And
So, yeah.
enticing.
And enticing.
And UNH said they could turn over in about a couple of weeks,
Yeah.
right? So
I think that's what,
if we get this done by the end of July, maybe mid-August, we can send out the postcards.
So what
That-
sort of a time
If we
are
do
you
it,
putting on
it's
getting
pushed.
the results back from the people?
I don't know.
If this is gonna help us
2 weeks.
figure out what people need to know.
Yeah, I don't know if we have a time yet. I think that that's a good question. I think that's another one we would put on you all or UNH to tell us what makes sense for respondents.
But do we want to send it? I mean, it would be interesting to ask them, what's the best time to send it?
Exactly,
Is it once the kids are back in school?
right.
Because August.
That's a good question, yeah.
Well,
When are you
franchement,
most likely to get a
on n'est pas- on n'est
response?
pas là, donc, voilà.
Mais oui.
So August is usually.
But Susan, do you
Well, I
want
was gonna say, I'm very concerned about
Yeah.
sending out a survey, and I have a couple of thoughts of other options that we could do perhaps to get the same kind of information. And one of them might be to ask the library if they will put out bookmarks that have our information on it. They've done it with the women, I'm trying to think of their names.
Find your voice.
Find your voice, thank you. They've done that. I mean, if we had a bookmark that went in every book that went out and there was a stack of them at the library, that might be an option. I'm also thinking that in the town office, if when someone comes in to register a car or a vehicle or a boat or whatever, we hand out this bookmark and we say, this is a town sanctioned committee. We are looking for your input. Please take this information, and if you have questions, either you can drop it in a Dropbox here, or you can email questions to the committee, something like that. And I'd like to see the picture of the watershed somewhere either in town, so that people can say, oh, there it is, and here are some of the latest questions that have been answered by the committee. And we put that up in either the town hall or the town window, and then to put that information about our committee on the bulletin boards that are in town, and half a dozen of them. So those are sort of my thoughts. Let's see what kind of input maybe we get from something like that. And mailing that postcard out to every address in Camden and just saying, this is the town sanctioned committee, please send us your questions. We're here working for you. My thoughts.
Will you review for me again what your reservations are about the survey?
I'm worried that people will answer the way whether the answers are correct. In other words, are we gonna have a mandate? Is someone gonna say, oh, we don't like this, or we don't want that, or whatever, and we're gonna have a mandate, and people are gonna say, well, this is what the survey said.
is there a
And-
specific question that you think might?
No, but I'm wondering what information are we really gleaning from this? And if we're trying to get the information out that we exist, are there other ways that we can do it that perhaps are more cost effective? And maybe, maybe we need to be at the farmer's market again. Maybe we need to set a table up in town and talk to people and say, we're a town sanctioned committee. What are your concerns?
Right.
I
think I guess I have two concerns with your proposed approach, and the first one is, I think, when you send something out to every mailbox, it is pretty demographically neutral. It really goes to not people that just go to the farmer's market or go to the library or register cars. And I think the other one too is just, I think you have the opportunity to get enough feedback to make it worthwhile. My concern is using those other methods, you might get too small of a pool that like UNH can be like, it's great you got results back, but it means nothing in a town, a town of 5,000 if you have, it may not be statistically valuable.
well, we don't know that people will answer our survey either.
Oh, no, I certainly,
Yeah.
it's certainly a risk that you face, but I think there's more opportunity to get, if you send it to everyone in the town.
Right, well, I guess that's where I was thinking, just a standard postcard that we have a town sanction committee, this is who we are, this is our website, and send that, not necessarily as a survey, but just send that out to everybody to say, please, ask us your questions. You can drop it in a mailbox at the town hall, or mail them to us, or email, or whatever works for you.
But it seems to me that we're asking people to send us questions pretty much all the time. And we have a hard time. I love the idea of the postcard, as Tyler says, because every mailbox, pretty demographic neutral, and everybody, it's people who don't watch, Zoom or come to the meetings, whatever.
And I think about like the audible, I think is it Arbor Day Foundation that sends out like the yearly, everyone here gets it, where it's like, it asks you about trees, and I think if it had been a postcard and it said, go to our website and take a survey, the fact that it's like, oh, there's boxes I can fill in, like I can fill these in and then just send it back in, like the effort is minimal. And I think because of that, they probably get more response.
I think one of the things that's really valuable about doing the survey is that we then have UNH able to look at that information and synthesize it in a way that's useful to us, which I don't know that we on our own would be great at taking all of those pieces of information and really like figuring out what the patterns are in it. And I think with the questions being more just sort of information gathering, it hopefully takes out some of that concern that it might pigeonhole us into something. That's just my thought.
So Susan, I just have not to pick on you, but because.
Speaking wheel, that's okay.
So did you see the sort of proposed or the draft questions that were in the packet?
Yes.
Those ones that are here, are there any in here or all of them that have the specific concern that you identified?
No, I mean, I think they're very neutral, and I'm just wondering what are we going to learn from it? That, is there going to be anything really substantial that we'll gain from this survey?
Okay, and maybe
That's.
Yeah, one of the important things that might come is what people are interested in knowing more about.
Do we care? Yeah, that's the
And then-
question, right?
Yeah, it
think
doesn't
it's
matter so much
And
whether,
maybe that's the question we need to put on a postcard to mail to every house. What do you want to know about on the river? And then heck with, how old are you and are you a full-time resident? And maybe we pick 2 or 3 of these questions from this survey and put that on the postcard, just like you were saying with the Arbor Day one, and it comes back.
But that means that we choose top 3. Not them.
and I think the last set, the open-ended questions do include something like that. That is, what is it you want to see fleshed out by our committee? So I think that would be, I mean, this is just a draft, right? I mean,
And
Yeah,
UNH would fix, like, make it work.
but the other one I think that could be useful is number 7, how often do you use the river for recreation? Because we really don't know other than spot checks,
Right.
peering down the river and seeing whether anybody is fishing or walking or kayaking or whatever.
so
It also asked about outreach and how we can best do outreach. I think that might be informative. And I think in general, I think it will also help people start thinking about the river in many ways that they're not thinking about right now. So it's just starting that conversation, igniting some interest. So yeah, I think it's valuable.
But I think to go to where Susan's going, I mean, I think it'd be really good to flush these out, because you know, how often you use Guncock River for recreation? I don't know if.
Yeah.
I guess the question is, would my recommendation to the select board change if everyone used it daily? Or if everyone never used it?
Yeah, does that question really matter? I mean,
I don't know.
yeah. And is it the river itself?
And again,
or
I
do we
think
talk
these
about
are
the
questions
watershed?
that UNH could help us. These are
Yeah.
just a draft, so I think.
If you're trying to parse things down to get to like a
Right.
postcard.
What we're trying to get at today is whether we want to, the committee wants to move forward with the survey. Do we want to take a vote? Do we want to?
Well, what is it? I was thinking about this. What is it
Yeah.
we're voting on? I mean, are we actually voting like this concept specifically, or just more of a vote of confidence to say like, yeah, let's go forward with this type of thing, but refine
I
it
would say
some-
the latter. I mean, this is what we're sending as a framework to UNH, and they've seen it already, and that's sort of has helped us taper it a little bit already. But you wouldn't be voting on this absolute
These
version
exact
of it,
questions,
yeah.
yeah. Just the possibility of moving forward with the survey.
with a survey.
And asking for help.
Okay.
I mean, I guess those are two different questions. Do we want to move forward with the survey? We could do it ourselves. And then the second part is, we want to work with the survey center at UNH, and which budget do we want to go with? Do we want the data analysis? So there's kind of three questions.
Would somebody like, oh,
I was gonna say, so can I ask Forrest, have you done surveys with UNH before, and did they give you the information that you were looking for? Did you feel that it was money well spent?
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't have recommended them to
Okay.
the committee. They're a unique organization. I deal with budgets all the time, and when they came back with a maximum budget of under 3,000, I was expecting 10.
I was.
That was a surprise, a pleasant surprise to me. That's just one person's opinion, but you know, I've done a handful, 4 or 5 over time, so I haven't done 100.
And the information that you got back, you felt was helpful to the committee that you were sending the survey out to?
Yeah, and what they do is they validate it scientifically so that the results are scientifically.
Yeah, I think the
statistically
analysis
significant.
is quite important, personally.
so just so we, I'm sorry,
I was also.
we do need to stay on schedule.
Oh, we're way off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's worth it, but it's worth it, there's other things that we can.
Very good.
I think I voiced concern at one point about doing a survey because, I was thinking we were gonna do it ourselves, and I know that it's really a good thing to do. So now that UNH is involved, and I feel like they have a very good, reputation in the system, my reservations have, pretty much disappeared. And I also, as I say, I like the way that the current setup of the survey is, because I was nervous about the demographic questions.
Okay.
So,
We can work on that.
yeah. So anyway, I feel much more like it's a good thing.
Right.
Okay, now, we're talking about this survey. Responses are gonna come in both paper and electronically.
That's another thing we
That's
need to
another
flesh out. So I think we just, sorry, in the interest of time.
I agree,
I'm
yeah.
just gonna be the mean.
So just entertain a motion from somebody to, let's keep it simple to an up or down. Like, do we proceed with a survey to be refined later or
Yes.
not?
Okay.
Well, so proceed to a certain, on a survey within UNH, right? I think it's.
Okay, somebody who's thought about all the parameters, make a motion.
I move that we go ahead with the survey and using UNH.
I second.
Okay, is any more detail, Forrest, that you think we ought to have?
I don't think so. I think there's a decision about the budget. I would recommend, based on what I just said, to go with the higher budget, so they help with the reporting. It's really,
Yeah.
it's kind of a drop in the bucket. It's paid for by the NICWIF grant. Maybe I didn't articulate that. That's pretty important. That's where the budget is, so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's really the key piece, is having them help analyze it, because if we just have it
Totally agree.
and it's just a pile of information, I'm not sure how useful that is.
Taxes up.
Yeah.
Ray, is your motion to be including the report? The sort of the Cadillac version?
Omnibus that way, yeah.
Okay, just want to make sure. So is there further discussion about this topic?
The only thing I would, going ahead with the survey, what I asked about is it going to be both paper and electronic?
And I think-
TBD.
response.
We will find out with,
Okay.
we're gonna work with UNH to figure out what is the best method for that.
Because I know some people in this town who do not use email.
Correct, yeah, we're trying to be all
There's other
inclusive.
ones who don't have cell phones. or whatever.
Absolutely,
So
yeah.
I think it's gotta be, you know, those are some opinions that we want.
Yeah, we've discussed that already
Okay.
to a certain degree,
Okay,
yeah.
good.
And it sounds like we will have, they're gonna come back to us, so next month or next meeting. We'll be able to either go up or down again.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Further discussion?
Oh,
So is the
Alright.
current motion including the total budget of 2,800?
yeah.
To move forward with the
2800?
survey and the higher budget of analysis.
Yes.
Yep.
And that's in second.
I seconded it, yes.
All in favor?
Good.
So one,
Opposed? Oh, I'm sorry.
so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in favor, opposed?
Okay.
1 and abstain?
Yeah, right.
I'm still thinking about it. I mean, I do, the question that we haven't asked, that I think is usually important in something like this is what could go wrong?
Yeah.
And it's echoing Susan's concern. I'm not thinking so much in terms of whether it would give us a mandate, given the questions, but how could this go wrong in some way?
So maybe.
Other than being a waste of money, in other words, if we don't get anything useful.
Well,
But maybe can I?
well, motion carries, but yeah.
Motion
but,
carries, but I think this is not the final marriage.
Exactly.
No, I get it.
Yeah.
So there will be other points in time where you can further refine, ask more questions of UNH. But there will be a methodology, a plan, management, so, this is not your final say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just, I think it's important to get it, just the
We
beginning,
don't have to actually send it out if we disagree.
we're just going on the first day. All right, so what time is it?
So
All right.
agenda
I think-
triage, we have not.
Yeah, I
We have
think
9 minutes.
we'll do Riverfest discussion over email, because I think
Yes,
that'll be easier.
Then wait.
Let's move to education committee, because I know that a lot of people want to, sorry, I'm
Yeah, go ahead.
barging in, but, education committee, there was a lot that came out of the dam tour, and I just wanted to
Oh, yeah.
capture that because I was really grateful that so many of you were there. And out of the dam tour, there were more meetings and more emails, and I just wanted to say thank you, first of all, for being so interested in drumming up all that interest from the committee or community. And to let you know that we also changed sort of the next meeting dates along those lines, because we thought we should do dam tour part 2. So late August, we're gonna do that instead of having, whatever else we had. So we're gonna move that, and then we're also,
Sorry, what is that exactly?
so
Part
we're
two?
not sure.
Oh,
Stay tuned. But probably Knox, Knowlton, and then I also East and West again, just because I think a lot of people weren't able to get all the information they wanted. There were a lot of people, so I think I'm more focused just on those 2, and then on Knox and Knowlton.
Okay.
And then probably another one on Montgomery at some point, but I think for this, we need to sort of
For
focus.
those 2 dams, any thought about when the owners of those dams might be approached?
Yeah, ASAP. So Mike Burke and I had a lunch today. It was lovely. And he and I are planning to chat with them this week or next. So we're gonna figure out what their stance is. Audra's been in contact with them as well. She has an idea of where they stand. And so we're gonna talk to them about what that looks like, and I think answer some of those questions you brought up earlier about, the legal ramifications, the property owner, what happens if they don't want to do anything? How does that affect the rest of the watershed decision?
Just
So,
so you know, there is a complication in the Knox Mill, which
yeah,
I've mentioned to Audra, because there is a Knox Mill
association.
Association,
Yes.
which has never met.
Okay.
And the voting power is divided between the Mechanic Street and the Washington Street
Oh.
buildings. And the Washington Street building has 2/3 of the vote. And the other side, I think there are 4 owners, has the remaining votes. But there's no organization, there's just paper. There's no board,
Okay.
it's never met. And it controls, you can't do anything to the pond without the
Okay, well,
association.
we'll follow up on that and get some information.
All right.
That's helpful background, though. Thank you.
One
Yeah.
quick question on the mill, is there any chance to get down to the Powder Mill Dam? I mean, it's not really a dam anymore, but should we, as committee, since it's one of our dams we're looking at, should we see it? And how do you get there?
Yeah, the people that own Shepherd Storage,
they've been very open to.
Right.
Yeah, I think they would be
Right.
fine with us.
Yeah.
Getting access to that.
Okay.
You're talking about the rooms, right?
Yeah.
The rooms,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah,
right,
yeah.
yeah.
I think they'd be really amenable to,
I'm-
you know, if we reached out to them.
Yeah, but I don't think we should go traipsing over their property without their permission, so, yeah, okay.
Keep on going with the dates and the plan for more outings, make sure that we all know about it.
Yeah,
because
so
it's-
July, and I'll send it in a
Yeah.
email as well, just so it's really clear, but July 25th. The committee, instead of a speaker series, the committee is invited to go out on some boats with Tim Trumbauer to talk about lake levels and lake monitoring and sort of the policy around everything he does, which is gonna be very interesting. And then our August 8th meeting will be just us, no speakers, so I think that'll allow for 2 full hours, which I think this committee could use. These agendas feel so tight, so I think I'm excited for that, and I already have an agenda started, but obviously would love to hear, we'll meet with all the subcommittees and sort of flesh that out as well. And then Dam Tour Part 2, and then we did have Stephen Moore and Tony Grassi on there. I do think we need to take that off based on some feedback we've received, but happy to have a discussion around that. We have a couple minutes because I think it would be an important discussion around how we want to wait until we have more options and more feasible options with Mike Burke included in those so that we understand what can we really do at Montgomery Dam. And I think we just don't have all those answers yet.
It could be a richer discussion.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, just, and I'm sorry, you
No.
alluded to this before, but just to pin this down.
Yeah.
The Dam Tour Part 2 is not necessarily going to be on August 22nd, or it is?
Potentially, yes. I just need to confirm with the same one,
Got it, thank you.
but roughly around then.
I think the sooner the better.
Yeah. It's pretty soon. But
Did we
yes.
feel there was a need for Stephen more discussion with regard to Harbor Park?
It's a great
Only as
question.
opposed to the proposed Tony Grassi?
Hmm.
Cause I know he was.
He's right there.
Yeah, and we're gonna run out of time. so-
Yeah.
I think we're still.
But we can take that, I don't think that needs to happen now, but
No, I think that is a discussion that.
and we can have that in the education subcommittee.
Cool.
One quick question, and then we only have a few minutes. On
Yeah.
number 4 on the agenda here, should be any of the committee, where did that come from?
Yeah, I took that off because
Yeah.
I heard it from a few different subcommittees this month
Mhm.
asking, should we have someone from Hope and Lincolnville? Should we do this? Should we do that?
Okay,
And then I put it on the agenda and then based on time, actually, I just wiped it off on my paper.
Okay.
And so I figure we can talk about that. over
Yeah, can you
our-
put that on the agenda in, not
Yes.
just membership on the committee, but how we want to reach out to those other towns?
Yes,
Right.
and that was another thing I thought we could also
Okay.
discuss with Tim, because he had, and I was thinking he could
Mhm.
sort of be our conduit to those
Yeah.
towns, and
Yeah.
we could utilize him to do
Okay.
that a little
We,
bit
we
better.
also thought about having more stakeholder discussion and fewer guest speaker, kind of switch gears here a little bit.
Yeah.
And have a wider audience or presence and have more discussions with the committee and stakeholders you want to talk to.
Yeah.
And who want to talk to you. So it's all in chewing process.
I'd like more debriefing too on the presentations, because we get so much great information, but then we never really talk about it.
Yeah.
So that's missing in my mind.
good, okay.
All right, can somebody make a motion to, did we adjourn this thing? We should adjourn it, right?
We
Yes.
stand in recess.
Step it, so. Co-chair. Oh, wait, before we do that, who's my next
What do we
co-chair?
do without you?
Yeah, who is the next?
Who's my
co-chair?
next
If we
co-chair?
go back to the beginning, it would be.
Yeah.
Sharon Grace.
No, not the beginning, Susan.
Susan.
Oh, Susan hasn't gone?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You went to-
You're right, you're right.
He did.
Apparently,
Susan
it's
Benring.
one of the same
Oh,
treatment for-
I'm so delighted, thank you.
All right, good.
They all survived, Susan. Yes.
And the grass is already down.
So do you wanna, what did you say, Rick, a motion to?
Well, we will stand in recess.
So we're gonna get you a gap.
Come back in 5 minutes.
There is, we have a gavel.
Sure.
Thank you so much, everybody.
There,
I think they're gonna be sitting down there
Yeah, I
and
think
it's just gonna all dry.
all right.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Ready for the next part?
There. We have, like,
And I'm wrong.
Oh, you're good.
Yeah, he's like, oh, yeah. He was just. She brought it. So it's like bringing new girlfriend. Yeah, yeah.
The same discussion guidelines will be used today as were used last month when we hosted Save the Dam Falls. So I want to emphasize the discussion guidelines apply to both the presentation as well as the following discussion, and they apply both to our guest speakers and committee members. The goal here is to create a mutually respectful platform for sharing information, ideas, or concerns related to the mission of the MRCAC. We are all here today because we love and care for the Megunticook River and the town of Camden. We ask that the presentation and discussion are framed around the following 3 questions. What are your questions or concerns about the Megunticook River project, and why do you hold these concerns? What actions do you think are needed by the committee to answer these questions or concerns? And what new or possibly overlooked information would you like the committee to discover and share with the community? Throughout the course of our discussion, please keep in mind the 7 guiding principles that we outlined in this document that many of you should have. I'll synthesize them quickly, but listen respectfully and remember that we all have different perspectives and experiences. Please minimize interruptions. If you have not already done so, please silence any phones and technology. We ask that you use courteous body language. You know, it's easy to have a reaction with eyes or hands. Use thoughtful language. Be open to changing your perspective based on what you've learned. Differentiate between opinion and informed knowledge. Practice humility. Understand that humans make mistakes, and individual mistakes do not shape the identity of an individual or an organization. So for those who don't know me, my name is Bina Squartis, and I am with FB Environmental. I will be moderating our discussion jointly with Rick today, who is serving in the position of the rotating vice chair. In that capacity, Rick will be assisting with meeting facilitation as needed. Rick and I will politely redirect the conversation if we feel these guidelines are not being followed. Do you have anything to add?
I don't, just sort of a gentle thought that the more we can focus on questions from the committee, I think that's one thing I think that we wished had happened at last month's meeting. You know, you have a lot to tell us, but I think you'll probably be able to tell us more useful information in response to questions. So to the extent that you can, let's focus on that part. Thank you.
And I'll turn the floor over to you all. So we have 30 minutes, you have 30 minutes to present, and then we'll cut it over to the committee to do 30 minutes of Q&A, and I'll give you a 5-minute warning when your 30 minutes is coming.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, I will tell you that my presentation is 15 minutes long.
Perfect.
I timed it 4 times today, and it's 15 minutes long, so I think we're in good shape.
We're okay.
Unless I fall asleep in the middle of it, which anyway, I guess, may I begin?
Yes, please, thank you.
I'm Susan Ryder, and I'll be the main presenter today for Restore Megunticook. With me is Tony Grassi, Robert Wasserstrom, and Robin Harlow, and they each are subject matter experts who will help me answer any specific questions that you may have after my 15 minutes. Check this. There we go. I'll use it up at this rate. Click this one. Whoops. The left one? Okay, here. No.
So just click the arrow. Don't worry about the mouse.
Okay, all right. Here we are. We are a group of people who came together because we believe that Camden deserves a chance to apply best practice in science and engineering to address the very real challenges that we're beginning to face with our changing climate. We have a strong commitment to environmental and fiscal responsibility. And among our group, we have various skills in various things. We have leadership in environmental organizations, background in public policy and community engagement, experience in elected office, deep knowledge of Camden history with some of us, and involvement also in other dam removal and restoration projects in Maine. I want to talk a little bit about how and why we formed. In 2021, the discourse about river restoration seemed to primarily focus on whether or not the Montgomery Dam should be removed, and not so much on why and how the Megunticook River should be restored. Our group saw a need to balance the discussion by talking about the entire river, not just one dam.
This vision statement from our website, restoremaguntacook.org, which I invite you to see, explains our vision. Restoring the Guntacook River to allow free-flowing water from the lake to the sea by removing relic dams and adding naturalized fish passage that will restore historical river connectivity and migration patterns, improve ecosystem health, and enhance flood resiliency. So we organized our group after the public information sessions down in Harbor Park in 2021. And as I said, we recognize the need for balance in more public discussions about the future of the river and in select board decisions and actions. And we wanted to make sure that voters had enough time to make the best decision. So early in 2022, we circulated a petition asking citizens if they were willing to have an open mind on restoring the Guntacook River. Enough people signed our petition in 3 weeks to qualify for the ballot in the following election. And the petition was read as follows. As part of the restoration of the Guntacook River, do you favor the select board proceeding with activities such as seeking grant funding on behalf of the town to improve water quality, reduce flood risk, and facilitate fish passage at the outlet of the river, including the removal of the Montgomery Dam to allow for a natural waterfall? And that petition was signed by 530 people. We believe we represent those 530 people and many more. So to further our advocacy efforts, we wrote columns in local newspapers, tabled on election days in 2021 and 2022, maintained a website, and perhaps most importantly, we proposed that the town of Camden establish a citizens advisory committee to address river restoration issues in a fair and objective way. So we're putting our confidence in you. And we oops, I went the wrong way. Okay, putting our confidence in you, it's going to take a lot of work. We hope that you will provide a forum for public discussion and learnings outside of select board meetings. We hope you'll consider the river system, not just one location at a time. And we hope you'll be in a position at the end of that to make a recommendation to be presented to Camden voters. And that's going to be a lot of work. We recognize that, and we're willing to work with you, certainly. Now, in advance of that, I'd like to get to the next section of the presentation, which is about some detailed information. As many of us remember, Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan said, everybody's entitled to his own opinion, but not to his own facts. So in that spirit, these next slides contain some information that we hope will help begin to build public consensus around the town's river restoration and watershed management plans. This is a picture of Knox Dam in 2021. Average rain and snowfall have risen by 9 billion gallons a year, or 16 inches a year since 1913, when records were first started being kept. By 2050, it's estimated that 5 billion gallons a year, or 9 inches more, is expected to fall on us every year. And our system is not built to handle that much water. It's just not. The three high hazard dams, which are the three main ones that control the river and the lake, control a whole 32 square mile watershed. And as Audra said, and was quoted in the Bangor News, and she summed it up pretty well, being where the mountains meet the sea, there's very little opportunity when there's a very extreme weather event for water to efficiently absorb into the watershed or make it to the ocean. Those calculations, by the way, are from the U.S. Geological Survey rainfall calculator and other information, other federally available sources of information. Now, we know that dam maintenance is costly and difficult. We learned a lot more about it last week, that wonderful field trip. It also requires a lot of expert attention, physical effort. We have a couple of close calls in October 2021 and May 2023, which we remember vividly. And in the flood of 1922, now over 100 years ago, we had 6 to 8 inches of rainfall at once, and it cost the town $1.8 million in current dollars. We're now due for another 100-year flood. That would mean open-ended costs to taxpayers. And so we have a choice. We can remove the dams with grant money and other funds, or pay for continued repair and maintenance. We recommend the removal of the remnants of Powder Mill and the obsolete Knox and Knowlton dams, since the cost of dam remediation, if they fail, would fall upon us, the taxpayers. And also, they can't be managed for flood risk, so they pose threats to abutting and downstream facilities and buildings. Now, the federal government has been supporting the removal of non-productive dams for 50 years. The goal of the Clean Water Act is to restore and maintain clean and healthy rivers. And since 1972, that Clean Water Act has really focused on one aspect of maintaining a clean and healthy river, which is allowing for sea-run fish species as a national priority. Obsolete dams reduce oxygen, they retain sediment, and otherwise reduce water quality. More than 45 dams have been removed throughout Maine, and fish runs are being successfully restored. This picture here is up at the Baggages, where they took out a dam and replaced it with a fish passage. And it's beautiful, and it's apparently working very well. Water quality is improving, biodiversity is increasing, and communities are enjoying increased recreation and economic benefits. A couple more dates I wanted to mention. 1999, the first large hydropower dam in the country is removed in Augusta from the Kennebec River, and the river is now restored to unquestioned benefit. In 2016, the EPA Office of Water publishes FAQs on removal of obsolete dams. I can give you the citation of that if anybody's interested. In 2021, Congress appropriated another $1.4 billion for river restoration. So this is a national priority because it's important to the health of our water system. And more, we know here in Camden, the fish are already here. Some of these sea-run species, alewives, elvers, smelt, brook trout, are already in the Camden Harbor, and they try to swim up the ledge when they can. But the present configuration of the Montgomery Dam prevents fish passage into the river. River herring or alewives are really valuable in many ways. They're a keystone species, meaning that they have a disproportionately large effect on their natural environment relative to their abundance. They're also valuable as commercial bait for fishermen, and we should do everything we can to increase their numbers and support them. Now let's talk about the Montgomery Dam. The current dam was privately owned when the Olmsted firm designed Harbor Park. It was subsequently excluded from 2 abutting historic districts. Significant repairs are now needed, and we're at a crossroads about prudent expenditure of public funds. Present dam was built in the 1930s, with the last functional application being small-scale hydropower production in the 1980s. A property of the Montgomery family, it was gifted unconditionally to the town of Camden in 1992. It was excluded from Camden's 2 historic districts because it doesn't meet state requirements for a unique design or industrial significance. Now, as we know, interfluve did not account for increased precipitation, more intense storms, and more debris in its work to date. So the potential effects of increased risks including both water and debris, must be carefully studied now. Also, it's important to note that FEMA's map shows risk from the Montgomery Dam back to the public safety building. This one, I'm sorry. Okay, all right, but we have choices. Okay, we can keep it as it is. We can repair it, manage it. There's some constituency to that. We can remove it entirely to allow the free flow of the river, or we can modify it to maintain river flow over the ledge and allow for fish passage. Our group recommends that the final river restoration plan eliminate the need for this dam to be actively managed and focus management on the 3 remaining dams to benefit the lake and river. Montgomery Dam should be modified to allow for fish passage and passive flow over the ledge and the waterfall. I'd like to take a minute, maybe 2 minutes, to describe the 10 benefits of dam removal for the Cook River as we see it, including removing obsolete dams, modification of the Montgomery Dam, and construction of fish passages. This would allow 2 miles of the river to flow freely, reconnecting divided ecosystems. It would improve oxygen and nutrient levels for fish, plants, and wildlife. It would enable native fish, including alewives and rainbow smelt, to complete their spring migrations to the lake, which would attract eagles, seals, and tourists. A healthier ecosystem makes the river and watershed more resilient to climate change. It would reduce flood risk for 94 homes and properties along the river. It would save taxpayers millions of dollars in dam operation, repair, and likely flood damage. It would create recreation opportunities such as kayaking and hiking along the river. It would allow for more consistent water levels in the lake and the river above Seabright Dam. It would improve sport fishing as more fish migrate up the river. And finally, it would enhance the aesthetic value of the McGuntacook watershed and Camden Harbor. You ask us for our questions. Well, we do hope the MRCAC is able to shed some light on some big picture items, such as quantifying flood risks throughout the entire watershed for precipitation volumes predicted by the U.S. Geological Service, FEMA, and other credible sources. We hope you can encourage the town to address all the water quality issues that impact the watershed, and help the town develop a comprehensive review of public funding opportunities that will enable Camden to strategically address both water volume and quality challenges in the future. We hope you can aid in communicating information on the current federal grant and communicate more detailed information about current operating costs and potential costs after existing dams are removed and modified. Our recommendations to you. And finally, you've asked us to offer some, so here we are, a few. We'd love it if you could develop a work plan for yourselves consistent with the current federal grant. And that would put you, we believe, in a position then to make recommendations at the conclusion of the grant for future actions. We'd love it if you could research other dam removal projects in Maine, obtain lessons learned by inviting other experienced towns to address the CAC, or organize a field trip to see for yourselves how it's been going. We have a handout actually here with us today that has a lot of information about other dam removal projects in Maine. We brought copies for everybody on the committee. Excuse me. We hope you'll work closely with the McGuntacook Watershed Association as a key stakeholder. Also, of course, invite input from all the property owners from the lake to the harbor. And organize more public events like the dam field trip. That was, and as we were talking about earlier, that was so extremely informative. It helped everybody establish a common set of facts. It built a lot of communication among stakeholders, and it engaged citizens. I saw people there who I've never seen around town associated with this issue before. And it was just really great that people were curious enough to come out and really want to see what all the fuss is about. So that was really, really helpful. We also have the handouts also digitally available from FB in case you need it. Anyway, I think I've used up my 15 minutes. I want to thank you so much for this opportunity. Do you have any questions for us?
You want to have the committee members come back to the table?
For question purposes, I think so, especially.
Okay.
Tyler's ready to go.
I just had a quick, I just wanted to summarize. So you were looking at recommending modifying with dispatches the Montgomery Dam, removing the Knox Dam, removing the Knowlton Dam, removing the Powder Mill hydraulic structure. Did you guys have any recommendations as a group with regard to the Seabright or the East-West dams?
Those dams are necessary.
Yeah.
Obviously.
So no changes to those dams, is it part of your recommendation?
Well, other than, as we saw the other day, there's a significant need for management.
Perhaps repair or management, yeah.
You know, because they're sort of terrifying.
Okay.
Okay.
And a liability to the individual as well as the rest of us.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Okay, question, when you mentioned about modifying Montgomery Dam, do you have some vision of how you would modify it, or would you think how it should be modified?
Well,
And I know you've got.
you know, I have presented my own, and you may or may not decide you want to see it, but that's up to you. What I discovered in doing that is there are ways. I suggested one, there may be others, that the dam could be modified to allow for fish passage, which would then sort of release all the upstream issues to be dealt with.
Right.
If you don't deal with that, then the federal funding is not available and you can't, we're not gonna get any help dealing with the upstream issues.
So just a follow-up question on what Tyler asked, and I think it goes to what you were just speaking about. With regard to the Seabright dams, at Seabright Dam and the east and west, would fish ladder construction or new development be necessary around any or all those three dams?
Yes, both Seabright, just for those of you who were there, sort of pretty obvious, standing there and you're looking at that long slope, creating natural fish passage through there looks pretty simple to me. I'm not an engineer, but it sort of to the casual observer, east and west are pretty tight. And so you need to create fish passage around east and west, and that's something that Airflume has sort of front and center on their agenda, as I understand it, for their current study. So that's an engineering challenge, but one that can be met apparently from their, if you read the first path of their report, but now they have to take it.
Yeah.
But you would need 3 Montgomery, Seabright, and east and west. You need 3 constructed passages of some kind, and they're varying. The harbor is too tight, and the way the water flows, you have to have a ladder. Seabright, you could create a naturalized passage. Knox and Knowlton, you could create naturalized passages, because even when you take the dams out, there may still be ledge things that you're gonna have to work around. But as I understand from the interface stuff, that's all possible.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just curious about something. Are the fish that people are seeing in the harbor, are they able to make their way up to the Montgomery Dam? Like if there's a big incline.
Only the old.
Well,
Sorry.
Elver's clearly, and Elver's, they can get around anything. Going upstream, they'll roll in a ball, they'll gather in a ball and they'll roll around on the grass. They got upstream literally. So Elver's can move much more easily and climb up vertical walls. The others, they can get up a certain distance from high tide. They can get up further than from low tide. But they can't get over the hurdle that is that 3-foot dam.
Okay. Actually, I have another question. Have you given any, I thought we were just talking in our meeting before this about the way the properties will change those people that are right on the river. Have you given thought to that? Like how that's gonna change their property values or their?
Well, one of the things that Susan had in their presentation, of course, was you all need to be sitting down and talking with us.
Yeah.
Because there are, at different, this river is so different along its stretch. In one place it's narrow, in one place it looks like a lake, it really varies. And the impact of dam removal will be really different for different people along the river. And some people are on a pond, let's say, and they will now be on a river. They'll have more shore frontage.
Yes.
They'll pick up acreage, but they'll be on a river, and so everybody may be impacted differently. And
Yeah, exactly.
that's something that's
Big piece of our work.
clearly you all need to.
Right.
From other dam removal projects that we've looked at, one of the things that you have to do when you do restoration of the river is stabilize the banks. Because when you're changing the flow of the water, that's gonna change the banks. And so that's obviously something that can be done, should be done, but it needs to be done, obviously, in collaboration with the property owners.
Right.
And it needs to be done with native, the material you use is really important.
Right. We sort of have to be after ready with native plants.
Yeah, you wanna, because you'll have a huge invasive problem.
Yes.
Get ahead of it growing.
Yeah.
There's a real science behind the plantings and a lot of examples online of successful restoration. It's actually really fascinating because every situation is a little bit different, every bank, every size of the river.
Mhm.
But the replanting part is a big part of it.
Do you have any thoughts on the progression or the steps that should be taken for removing dams? In other words, would you recommend that maybe Montgomery would be modified first and then Knowlton and Knox? Or do you have any thoughts one way or the other, or which things should be addressed first, steps that should be taken?
Go ahead.
Yeah,
I know you've been involved in dam restoration.
yeah, and everyone is a little different, and I think here, probably the most important issue will be what representations you need to make in order to get federal funding. So I'm sure if you said to the feds, you know, we're gonna figure out Montgomery later, but we want your money to take down Knox, you won't get it. So now whether they ultimately in sort of approve a program where you actually remove some upper ones before you toy with the others, that's up to NOAA ultimately. I mean, that's, you know, that's when you get into the negotiation with them on what's the right engineering solution. And there may be engineering reasons to do A before B. You know, there's a excuse me, a silt issue behind Knowlton, and that might dictate whether Knowlton or Knox goes for, you know, certain things. That's an engineer's problem. That I don't know the answer.
What I hear you saying though is that the decision would have to be made on Montgomery Dam first, as far as any funding, but that would have to be integral to whatever application for the funding.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
Yeah, right. So I'm a lay person and I have done this work with NOAA, but every circumstance is different. You've got experts in FB who can give you better guidance than I can. But my understanding is that in my conversations, that they wouldn't fund activities upstream unless fish can get there. That's the driver for NOAA. They want fish to be able to get up to the lake.
So I presume you've been, a lot of the work that you've done so far, trying to figure out what things might look like, has included modeling. In the course of any of that, have you looked at how changing river patterns, removal of Knox or Knowlton or Knowlton would impact sections of either the road or buildings that the river runs underneath?
That's up to the engineers. I mean,
but I thought
Now
you engaged with engineers.
Well,
Well, I thought there was an engineering study that you commissioned at some point that,
no,
okay,
we
Understood.
we have commissioned no work. I personally, with my wife Sally, commissioned to look at Montgomery, but that's the only.
just moving on, right, okay.
The McGonagall's a really interesting river, and we've encountered this in some of our discussions because it enters so steeply, even in its, you know, in its current path. If you removed, for example, the Montgomery Dam, it's still a pretty aggressive slope without a fish ladder. If the Montgomery Dam was removed, would you still want a fish ladder to? I mean, so if you look at the slope of that, it's probably twice what would be recommended for alewives.
And my understanding is, if you took out the entire dam.
Yep.
And remember when we were all standing up on the dam and.
Sure, it's about a 12-foot elevation drop, I think.
Right, but when we were standing there and you were looking at the smiling cow and she was telling you how to unclose the gate. The dam includes everything over to the right. And so if you took out the dam, I think what you'd find, and again, interfluence can answer the question, but I think what you'd find is that the river is going to go over to where the landing basin is at the foot of Harbor Park. So that hillside would go. The river would just take all that. Obviously you would remove it, but the river wants to go that way. And if the river went that way, it would be a much more gradual slope.
So you feel the original river path was probably closer to the 400-foot run out that I think you had in your model.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
One of the concerns that I've heard a lot is that there would be some sort of negative economic impact to removing or altering the dam as it is. And one thing that you mentioned in your slides was that with the 45 other dams that have been removed in Maine, you've seen increased recreation and economic benefit. Do you guys have a collection of that information that's available that we would be able to look at? Just because it's so counter to the other viewpoint that I think the two together would be really helpful.
And if you don't have it now. and you
Yeah, I mean, not
supplement-
right this second necessarily, but something that we could.
Straight from Kinko's?
Should I pass it around?
Sure.
Thank you.
It's a good point. I think what you're getting at is, has anybody done an economic analysis
Yes.
of dam removal? And that, I can't specifically answer. I know that, you know, episodically, when they talk about various dam removal projects that happen, river restoration projects, they usually say that, you know, they talk about the economic benefits. But, you know, I don't know if anybody's actually looked at that finite. That's a good project to look into.
I'm guessing they've measured the financial benefit to the town by having tourists come in, for example, Gemiscata, some of the towns down east. That's very measurable.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we do get those numbers. I don't personally have them, but each town has provided sort of a recap after they went through what we're going through.
Right.
Yeah, we can handle
And
that.
so I think
Fourth grade study.
the economic benefit, in my eyes, it's the tourist dollars, really Camden as, this is what we did, this is a success. A month early and see the fish.
Right. I think some of the concern, as I perceived it, was that if, you know, if the river flowing through, right through town shifted in some way, then those properties, you know, directly looking at it may inherit some economic hit from having that scenery change or sort of what they offer be altered. So, which is an interesting piece that I'm still trying to understand, but yeah, the idea that there's some economic benefit is potentially counter to that, so.
I think it would be prettier. So if I were on those decks, I would think it would be prettier.
Yeah, and certainly the perception, that's, yeah, sort of one of those not measurable pieces because it's opinion, yeah, totally.
You mentioned something about if the old dam was taken away, that the river would flow into what is now part of Harbor Park. But I think that doesn't that create a lot of other problems as far as being a historic park?
I don't think they were proposing that. I was just,
I know.
yeah, I think it was more of a conversation about,
Okay, fine. No, they weren't proposing it.
it's more about a conversation about elevation and,
Right.
and, and I think the true restoration, if the river original path was perhaps less steep on the approach.
Right. But you would be obviously creating a significant impact on a national historic landmark.
Yeah.
Which already needs great repair. So one would think this maybe could be dealt with in a holistic manner, meaning the wall's already falling in and it's already flooding. Unrelated, but perhaps could be related.
Yeah, it's interesting, you know, how far does your mandate go around the corner? Yeah, I think it's something you need to think about as you're thinking about Montgomery Dam is Harbor Park, and money's gonna have to be spent on sea level rise issues managing Harbor Park at some stage. And whatever you do with the foot of the river is gonna have to relate to whatever is done in the park. They're separate issues, but they're clearly related issues.
And I apologize for being so dense about this, but I'm trying to picture where you're saying that the natural. So if I'm standing in the cobblestone landing, you know, the section that kind of slopes down into the water, that I'm looking up. Are you saying that if the dam is removed, it will naturally flow to where the sidewalk and grass area is?
That's my understanding of it. Yeah, you know, that's all fill, right? So Harbor Park, that's all fill in there. And if you pulled that dam out and the corner of the dam holds back all that.
The concrete,
You
right?
remove that, the water's gonna wanna go that direction. Apparently, that's the history. And again, I'm not the historian, but that's sort of my understanding is that the river wants to go that way and that would be the more gradual slope.
Yeah.
You do that and you're mucking with the Olmsted brothers, all of the issues in and around Harbor Park as a resource for the town.
As you guys have done your research historically, we've had a hard time finding a ton of evidence of McGuncook River and the alewife runs. Have you found evidence of that in the history? Because it's one of the things that keeps coming up and we get a document that references these other rivers, whether it be duck trap or, all the way down to, Damscott Mills and things like that, about these big alewife runs, and we don't have it in this area, and we haven't figured out why.
Who wants to get it going? I could start it. Camden was settled so early and dammed up immediately, 1791, is that correct?
Yeah.
That immediately the airways would stop, and then 11 more dams went in immediately. In 1806, they wanted to get to a town meeting to reopen the rivers to allow alewives through. That document's over at the Rockport Town Office. It got voted down. Now, one would think probably it got voted down because everyone who lived in town in 1806 owned a dam. It was a man and not a female and not poor. And so that just ended the discussion there. So that was probably the end of the alewife front. But I believe McGuncook can't be the only river in Maine that didn't have this type of fish run. It just doesn't make sense.
Does the 1806 document refer to restoring the run? Is that
Yes,
wording
it
it in there in that way?
to let the fish run again.
Okay,
There was a state mandate.
Yeah, from
Yeah.
Massachusetts.
well, right, but if the
That's right.
document in 1806 actually refers to the concept of restoring a run, then that implies there was a run versus like,
I think it was
It's
a generic,
different.
it was a generic
okay,
document for like every river, right?
oh, gotcha, okay,
Yeah.
And it was actually Massachusetts.
Right.
Massachusetts.
yeah, right, yeah,
But it's an interesting document to read.
sounds like it.
And I guess, like, I gather what the fish biologist will say is that the conditions in McGuncook Lake are appropriate. They're the kind of place you would expect naturally to have it,
But
based on the bottom of the contours back
yeah, but I think if you go to, before the dams were in, the Leonard Lake was a small pond and with a small outlet coming down. And we had the speaker here from the Wabanaki, that the Indians did not, when they came down the coastline, did not really stay here or do any, there's no verbal or oral history of them fishing in this area or making weirs to catch fish. So, and
Yeah, listen to that, you talked for about, all the words imply, and like, you talk to kayakers today, they will confirm that these are dangerous waters.
Right.
And so they didn't tend to access Camden Harbor because coming along the Northport shore is apparently a pretty airy path.
Yeah.
Couldn't they have come overland?
Of course, they could have.
Having summer and winter camps differently.
Sure, yeah.
And I think we were told that in the higher elevations, there were plants that the Native Americans wanted, so they would have been in the area.
Yeah.
They might not have been able to find shellfish, but certainly they could have had a summer camp nearby.
Right.
Recently, I've spent some time researching this, and actually just today, received a bunch of information on First Americans in Camden Harbor, where their camps were, what they were called, and the dates. Courtney has all the information, so she was going to share it with you after this meeting. So it was very, very, very interesting.
Yeah.
There isn't a lot of written history because they don't write their history down.
Yeah.
But these people were experts, they're qualified, and all the references, Courtney has everything, so hopefully that will help.
Just a quick backing up to the document that you mentioned, the Rockport possesses the 1802 document. By any chance, did you all make an electronic copy of it yourselves?
There's one floating around, we could probably get you.
If you wouldn't mind, yeah, that would be helpful as well. Thank you. I have to make a list for you. For Courtney.
You recommend that we go take a look at some restoration projects. Is there one in particular that you think would be particularly appropriate for us to take a look at? I know Bagaduce is closed, and obviously there's Damascus Mills.
Yeah, Damascus is such an engineered
Yes.
solution. It's called, I think what they call it, cool and weir system. And so that's not what I would.
Okay.
I might go to the Bagaduce, I might, or what's the one,
Everything.
no,
There's another one, it's a little bit smaller.
yeah, it'll come in
Well,
a
all right.
second. There's a really interesting one that's got a
You
story.
can send it, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
And would it be possible to have a copy of your presentation today for us?
Yes, we have it and I'll send it out, yeah.
Could I just jump in? Does everyone have two documents?
No.
There you go.
We don't have that one.
I only have the 2-page one.
That's the one. You. It should be interesting. So. What I've included in, what I found in looking at the other, fish pass.
Do you have an extra, Courtney?
Here, you can have it. And I'll send this out in an email because I also have it.
Okay, thank you.
I don't have one.
And just a quick point, I apologize, folks, but the format of the meeting, it looked like some public folks wanted to ask questions as well. Just as we did last week, questions are limited to the committee members, so just if you have specific questions for these folks, maybe just catch up with them after the meeting, please.
And you can always follow up with us after in an email. We'll make sure you guys have that.
Could I just finish when I was mentioning about this?
Yes, please.
What I did here was a selection of a few. I haven't found a single project that faces exactly the same situation that we face, but there are, but similar problems have been faced in a variety of projects. So one project might have faced a steep climb and another project might have faced adjacent landowner issues and whatever. So that document, particularly the title one that we passed around, sort of includes case studies of fish dam removal and fish passage that altogether, taken as a package, would address most of the issues that we've been talking about here in Canada.
Okay.
All right, and there are lots of others, so if you want more case studies, I'd be happy to send them along.
Other questions, folks?
I have another question. One of the things that you mentioned in your presentation was that you felt your proposal would save taxpayers millions. Do you have over a time frame that you feel like that savings would be? Or, I mean, I feel like the initial cost of working with changing dams so significantly would be really high. So is there some sort of time frame that you're talking about that the taxpayers would be saving?
Well, I guess the point I was trying to make is that we have an opportunity to use federal money because it's national policy to restore rivers. And if we can apply successfully that for those grant funds, we don't have to pay for it ourselves.
Oh, okay, I see what, yeah, I see what you mean.
And if we don't, if somehow that doesn't happen and we have another 100-year flood or 500-year flood or anything else happens, then it's all gonna be on us.
I'm also
Thank you for
waiting.
clarifying.
And I can't quantify that, you know.
No, I think you did a good job of explaining where you're coming from with that, so thank you.
Too, is we're still waiting for numbers from our dam tour.
Right,
And one of my questions was, what does it cost to do what we're doing? I mean, that has to be quantifiable as well.
Absolutely.
If we could eliminate the extra manpower and insurance risk and everything else of downtown, there's a number right there.
right.
And I would also say that this is a question that we put to you. You know, you're really now in a position with your consultant and with the other help you have to get some real numbers or real estimates life cycle cost for whatever construction is done. Maintenance, repair on, projected for Fort, all that stuff is in other projects that we've been involved in. I don't see why it wouldn't be involved in yours.
Well, I'm gonna say again, I said it earlier, I think it's, a lot of it is in the interfluve report.
Yes.
A lot, they have all the different scenarios and different little spreadsheets on how those costs come together. It is a little outdated, I guess, 5 years ago, and things have changed, but there's probably some percentage we can tack onto it.
Question also, that you brought up the interfluve report. I'm sure that your group took a good look at the interfluve report and everything. Were there certain parts of that you had issues with, that you thought that they were either understating the problem or overstating the problems that they looked at?
Well, one obvious point is that they didn't really look at future projections for, climate change induced weather events. They didn't account for that in their analysis. They looked at hydrology and river management with kind of stasis, just as it is now.
Yeah.
And we believe that that's probably risky.
The other point Susan made earlier was that, and we all saw it, or we didn't see it, but heard about it, visiting East and West. All of them, and I don't know why they do it this way, but as I understand the way Interfluve does their analysis, they assume no obstructions. And that's a terrible assumption to make, because when you get a big high water event, you're gonna get obstructions. You're gonna get trees, or you're gonna get everything. Had canoes, kayaks, and trees all up there. It sort of blew my mind. He said that the water level at the trash rack was like more than a foot higher than the water level of the spillway. So it's I don't know why engineers do it that way, and you guys are in a position to ask Interfluve to be smarter, I think, rather than just give me your kind of the standard answer.
Just as an aside, I know someone who's told me that they live up from the Knowlton Street Dam, that their neighbor still can't find his canoe. It's down in the river somewhere.
That'll show up in the model, when you have your 3D model and you pull up the dam.
Okay, I did have a question, just in response to Susan, your presentation. One of the recommendations you gave to the committee was to make sure that our rephrasing it, but make sure our work plan is consistent with the federal NIFWF grant. And I'm curious if I've just set off a bell, like, what is it? Is there anything that we've been doing that you would suggest is inconsistent with the grant?
Well, that's a good question.
Thank you.
We don't really know exactly what the grant requires and what the time frame is and what the work plan of the grant is. It might be that you are dovetailing neatly, and that would be wonderful, but
do you all know?
do you know what's in the grant?
And what the specifics,
Yeah.
what are the specific engineering, how's the money gonna be spent in that grant? Over what, I got approached on the subject of what do you call I&I, effluent issues in town, and
I.
and my suggestion was, boy, if you got $1.5 million grant floating around out there, I'd spend some of that money trying to figure out water quality issues on this river. Right, there are, I bet you, significant water quality issues. The town hasn't been, is one of the first things that Forrest mentioned when he first walked the river, is we better do some monitoring, and the guy started that. As I understand, it's now been turned over to the association, but what are the combined stormwater overflow issues? How they affect the water quality? Do you have septic leaching into the river? Anybody want to bet on that subject? Right, guaranteed there are septics leaching into the river. So I would, and that doesn't tend to be, Interfluve's and engineering. They're a civil engineering, I guess is the right way to think about it. And I spent some real money trying to figure out what are the other problems in the watershed. Susan referenced those, you've got, culvert problems. You know, there's one thing to take care of the main stem, and it's another thing to take care of the tributaries, and we discovered that when we did the dam removal project on the Penobscot River. We took out two and built a fish passage around a third, sort of major main stem dams, and freed up 1,000 miles of main stem. We had another 2,000 miles of tributaries that were still blocked because of undersized culverts and that kind of stuff. Clearly here in Camden, we've got a problem with undersized culverts, right? All that stuff is related to the water quality in this watershed, and I would hope you would think more expansively. It's a little bit like somebody was talking earlier about the Riverwalk. The Riverwalk ought to be a dead center part of your, it seems to me, you're thinking about the river and its impact on the town of Camden. So I would encourage you to broaden your mandating, your thinking, and then getting back to how does that relate to how that grant's going to be spent. And, you know, I looked at the online stuff and it on the grant and the funding, and it says, you know, details could be provided. Details could the end of every section. There are no answers. There are more details available. Again, I'm assuming you all have access to all of those details and will be actively trying to understand how that money is being spent. And then you can build your plan so it dovetails with whatever results Interfluve comes up with at whatever stages. It's a little hard because you were 3 or 4 months ahead of Interfluve, right? You were meeting and trying to get going, and they weren't doing any additional work. Now they have a work plan, and presumably you guys would be all heavily wired into that.
Go ahead, Tim.
Where does your group stand on natural hydraulic events as far as like snags, river blockages, beaver dams? I watched an interesting video on the Bagadoos, and it seemed like they were so concerned about the alewives run that they're up there ripping out beaver dams every year to try to let the alewives in. And it seems to me very counterintuitive. They're so focused on the fish supplying lobster fishermen with alewives and trying to create this healthy run that they're kind of intentionally destroying other parts of the ecosystem. Seems very, you know, same question with regard to flooding. You know, obviously, if you feel the dams are causing flooding, which is, we can both structures, I've seen both studies, but you know, whether you're think beaver dams should be removed to try to limit flooding.
My answer to that and a ton of these questions is it's all river specific. So while there are lessons to be learned elsewhere, it's all, and it's the same in the forests. You know, there are right answers in forests in place A and a different right answer in place B. And you know, you can get sort of trapped into sort of thinking there is an answer, because there isn't, and you have to really understand your, in this case, watershed, and really, you know, do we have beavers?
Yes.
I don't know, you know, where are they? Are they making lodges now? What are the impact of that? What's likely to happen to those if you change water levels? All of that is part of understanding the hydrology in the river. And again, you know, you're our great hope here. Because I don't know the answer. And, you know, maybe what they're doing in Bagadoos makes sense, maybe it's stupid, I don't have a point of view. You have to be there and really understand the Bagadoos. Yeah.
I just wanted to say that I was interested in you talking about other aspects of taking care of the river, and really under discussed, and I think kind of intractable issue to some degree is impervious surfaces and how they impact waterways. And I feel like I've brought it up in this group before because I'm so fascinated by that. Like, it really is a very impactful thing that is really hard to retrofit. And I just was interested in what you were talking about, other aspects of taking care of the river. That's a huge one for me.
Like I was Tannery Park the other day, you know, and there's still a lot of impervious surface at Tannery Park. So that serves no purpose other than quick wash of whatever lands there in the river, so it's not just the impervious surface, it's not just roads, it's roof building.
Right,
and
yeah.
It's a huge.
But if we could slow some of the water down in those big rain events, we would, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. If you had places for the water to settle, that's what wetlands do, natural wetlands.
Exactly.
That's what they do, and you don't want to be plugging up your wetlands, you want them there for your storm surge
Right,
capacity.
yeah.
Well, and I would imagine some of the plantings that you guys were talking about would be to those ends of creating, greater filtration, lower.
Yeah.
Slow things down.
Deb or Susan, do you, either you got? Okay. All right. Any other? Yeah, and again, I don't know if you heard me before, but if folks from the public have questions for these folks, just try to catch up with them after the meeting. It's just the ground rules we laid right at the outset where all questions would come through the committee members, so. Bad form to change now. So, any other committee questions? Well, thank you very much. And hopefully someone was making a list of our requests. But if you have anything, you can share them straight with Forrest or Bina, and they all get to us. So appreciate the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your time. Thanks for taking on this huge.
Yes.
undertaking.
Yes.
And are we, is there more here? Or are we done? All right, we are adjourned. Can't. I just-
If you don't, somebody might make it for you.
Yeah.
Get your own map.
Grace.
You should ask Mike Burke to come to our next meeting.
He's planning on it, based on our conversations.